You're helping your Gen X parent clean out a crowded closet. At first, it seems simple. Keep what matters, donate what still works, throw away what no one has touched in 20 years. Then you open a box. Inside are faded birthday cards, photographs with no dates, a broken Christmas ornament, school drawings with curled edges, a recipe written on stained paper, and a cassette tape that no one in the house can currently play. You see objects that have lost their practical use. Your parent sees a kitchen that no longer exists, a voice they haven't heard in years, a holiday before the divorce, an argument that was eventually forgiven, a child who is now an adult, a relative who is no longer alive. So when you casually say, "We can probably throw most of this away," something changes. Their body tightens. Their tone becomes defensive. They reach for one damaged object and say, "No, not that." They may not even be able to explain why. From the outside, the explanation seems obvious. Nostalgia, stubbornness, maybe an inability to declutter. But what if they aren't protecting the object? What if they're protecting access to a version of the family and a version of themselves that exists nowhere else? Because sometimes throwing away an ordinary object can feel strangely similar to losing the person connected to it a second time. Consider a chipped coffee mug that belonged to someone's father. The mug is not valuable. It cannot be sold. It may not even be safe to use. But when the person holds it, they remember the way their father stood at the kitchen counter before work. The sound of his keys, the smell of coffee, the small conversations that once felt forgettable. That is one reason objects become emotionally powerful. They act as retrieval cues. A photograph, a handwriting style, the smell of an old coat, or the texture of a holiday decoration can unlock details that are difficult to reach through deliberate memory alone. You can try to remember your grandmother's kitchen and get only a vague image. Then you find her handwritten recipe card, and suddenly you remember the drawer where she kept the towels, the radio playing in the background, and the way she corrected you when you measured something wrong. The object does not simply represent the memory, it helps reconstruct it. And for many Gen X adults, that function may carry unusual weight. They grew up in a world where family memories often had only one physical copy, one envelope of vacation photographs, one home movie, one box of letters, one recipe written in a particular person's handwriting, one cassette containing a voice that was never uploaded anywhere. There was no automatic cloud backup. There was no folder full of nearly identical images. If the photograph disappeared, the image might disappear with it. If the letter was destroyed, the handwriting could be gone forever. That scarcity can change the emotional meaning of an object. A small envelope no longer feels like memorabilia. It feels like evidence. Proof that this trip happened. Proof that this person once laughed that way. Proof that this version of the family existed. And that brings us to something deeper than nostalgia. Family objects do not only remind you of other people, they help you maintain a continuous story about yourself. A child's handmade card may remind a mother of her son at 7 years old, but it may also remind her of who she was at that time. Younger, exhausted, needed, uncertain, still becoming the parent she hoped to be. An old photograph of siblings may preserve more than their faces. It may preserve the role someone played in the family, the responsible one, the peacemaker, the funny one, the person who kept everyone together. We build identity partly through stories. This is where I came from. This is who raised me. This is what we survived. This is who I used to be. Physical objects can become anchors in that story. They connect the child someone was, the adult they became, the people they lost, and the family they are still trying to understand. Once an object becomes attached to that personal history, discarding it may feel like rejecting a former self. But there is another layer. In many families, one person quietly becomes the keeper. They store the photographs, they remember the birthdays, they inherit the dishes no one else wanted. They save the funeral programs, the school records, the Christmas decorations, and the box of letters everyone promises to look through someday. No one officially gives them this job. It simply happens. Their siblings say, "You're better at keeping this stuff." Their children assume the old pictures will always be available. Relatives decline the boxes, then call years later asking, Do you have a photo of Grandpa in his uniform? And the keeper usually does. Over time, preservation stops being a preference and becomes a role. They are no longer deciding only what they personally want to keep. They feel responsible for what the entire family might regret losing. That responsibility can produce guilt. Throwing away a photograph may feel like making a permanent decision on behalf of people who are not in the room. Discarding inherited dishes may feel like disrespecting the person who used them. Letting go of a child's schoolwork may feel like admitting that a stage of parenthood is truly over. The object begins carrying more than memory. It carries duty. This is especially interesting because many Gen X adults are often described as highly self-reliant. They may be practical, independent, and uncomfortable asking for emotional support. But self-reliance on the outside does not mean there are no emotional anchors in private. Someone may rarely speak about missing their father, yet carefully preserve his tools exactly as he left them. Someone may insist that they are fine after a loss, but become deeply upset when another relative suggests donating an old jacket. The object can provide a socially acceptable way to stay connected to feelings that are difficult to express directly. Instead of saying, "I still need him," the person keeps the tools. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid I'll forget her," the person saves the recipe. Instead of saying, "I don't know who I am now that my children are grown," the person keeps every drawing. That does not automatically make the habit unhealthy. Preservation can be intentional, nourishing, and full of gratitude. A box of letters can help someone feel connected to their family history. An inherited table can become a place where new memories are created. A holiday decoration can preserve a tradition across generations. But the same behavior can also come from fear, unresolved grief, guilt, difficulty accepting change, or the anxiety of making an irreversible decision. Imagine someone who keeps every item from a deceased relative because choosing only a few feels impossible. To select one object seems to imply that the others mattered less. To donate the clothing feels like abandoning the person. To throw away a broken item feels disrespectful, even though the relative themselves might never have wanted it saved. The person is not merely keeping objects, they are avoiding the emotional burden of choosing. And that is where the central conflict changes. It is no longer simply about keeping versus discarding. It is about conscious remembrance versus fear-driven preservation. Is the object helping you stay connected? Or is it protecting you from fully feeling that something has ended? The answer will not be the same for everyone. In fact, some Gen X adults develop the opposite response. They throw things away easily. They scan a few photographs and discard the originals. They keep one letter instead of 50. They feel relief when old furniture leaves the house. For them, objects may not represent safety. They may represent obligation. Perhaps they grew up in a home where possessions came with guilt. Perhaps inherited items felt like someone else's expectations entering their space. Perhaps mobility and autonomy became more important than continuity. One sibling may save every family card while another keeps nothing, even though they grew up in the same house. That difference tells us something important. Generation provides context, but it does not determine psychology. The deeper question is, what possessions came to represent inside each person's emotional history? Connection or confinement? Love or responsibility? Identity or burden? So before judging the person who cannot release an old coat, it may help to ask a more precise question. What are they actually afraid of losing? The coat itself? The person who wore it? The memory it activates? The family role attached to it? Or the feeling that some earlier version of life is still within reach? And if you are the person holding on, the same question can change everything. Do you keep this because you genuinely want it? Or because you feel guilty imagining it gone? Does it help you remember? Or do you believe you are responsible for preventing the past from disappearing? That distinction matters because letting go does not have to mean forgetting. And keeping everything does not guarantee that grief has been resolved. Sometimes a healthier form of remembrance is selective. You keep one handwritten recipe and record the story behind it. You photograph a child's school project before releasing the physical copy. You preserve a few letters that capture a relationship instead of demanding that every envelope carry the full weight of that person's life. The goal is not to force yourself to become less sentimental. It is to stop asking every object to perform an impossible task. No photograph can preserve an entire childhood. No piece of furniture can keep a family from changing. No box can protect every version of you from being lost. But an object can still be meaningful when it is chosen with intention rather than fear. So return to that crowded closet. The faded cards are still there. The broken ornament is still broken. The cassette still cannot be played. But now the question is different. Not, why can't you just throw this away? But, what psychological responsibility has this object been carrying? Maybe it has been carrying love, maybe grief, maybe loyalty, maybe the fear that if no one protects the evidence, the family story will disappear. And perhaps the most compassionate thing we can do is not demand that every object be saved or insist that every object be discarded. It is to understand what the object has been protecting and then decide whether it still needs to carry that weight. Because sometimes the hardest thing to release is not the possession, it is the version of yourself that still lives inside it. If one object came to mind while you were listening, share what it is and whose memory you feel it carries.